Welcome, Louise. And all I'm going to say is, so it's all made up. What do you mean by that? And how do you know?
Okay, so Anne, we met a number of years ago. I suppose at that time in my life, I hadn't realised or hadn't saw what I have come to see over the last few years about so much in my life was just made up. So I had, as I'd grown up as a child, as I'd been a teenager, etc., I'd gathered all these different things about who I was or who I was supposed to be. And so much of them were just made up. So an example I would give is creativity. So growing up, if I was cooking, if I was baking a cake or anything, I was always rubbish. It never come out very well. If I was in art class, my picture was horrendous. And people would have made comments along the way that I just wasn't creative. I wasn't creative at all. So I believed it. So that was part of me. So I decided I wasn't a creative person. So as life went on, as I become a grown-up, I just wasn't creative. So if there was anything that I felt boxed into the creativity world, I just said, oh no, I'm not creative. I don't do any of that. And then after I had come across this understanding for myself, I started to test it because things in my life started to show up. And I used to think, okay, let's see if I can test this a little bit more to see if there's any truth in this. So one of the things I did was in our home, we had an old garden shed, and it was lying and nothing was happening. And I said to my husband, I want to play with that garden shed. I want to create it into, I called it a woman shed, a lady shed, a female shed. And my husband was like, yeah, no problem, go ahead. And with that, I got it dry-lined. I bought pink and blue paint. And of course, I was a very black and navy sort of person because, I wasn't creative. And I got it all dry-lined and got it all painted on the inside. Now, if my son heard me saying that, he'd say, yeah, all right, Mum, I painted most of it. But I directed the traffic. And we got the shed painted. I got all these lovely pictures, different quotes, etc. Where the shed was, it was, we have a house which is on the seaside. So I actually took really a lot of time in getting the shed positioned so that when the doors of the shed were opened, it looks over the bay, over the sea. Because I had kind of felt to sit in the front of the shed that it would be really tranquil and peaceful to just sit there and look out. And I positioned a desk and a chair inside, and I got all these soft furnishings. And then I got this guy to come in and build a little decking at the front of it, and got it all painted and had a little bell outside, and just absolutely played with it, and played with the fact that I'm not creative. Says who? And just that it was just hilarious that all of my life, like when I think back, my brother, he probably has no recollection of saying this to me, but if I was buttering, making sandwiches, I was so uncreative. There would have been holes in the bread from where I would have forcefully tried to butter the bread because I just had two left hands, and he would have made a comment to me, oh God, look at the shape of that, you have two left hands. So all of this kind of spiraled into my belief that I wasn't creative. And then the shed was just, and then it became a joke in the house because it was the girls' shed. I have 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. So it was very much about this was the girly shed for us. And then it was funny because after a while that happened, my husband then kind of said at one point, yeah, I think I might get a shed myself and make kind of a bit of a man shed out of it. And, even still, I suppose the achievement was in doing it. And the fact that I created this space for myself to be able to go and maybe get time out from the family and just sit on my own and read a book if I wanted to. Because we, as I said, we have got 4 children and a dog. And sometimes it's hard to get a little bit of space, a bit of haven within the busyness of the house when we're all off together. So it was another space to create that. So that whole creativity. And then people that I would have worked with and some people that I coached with, when I've told this story to them, they joke and they laugh and say, not creative, you have 4 children, not creative, you've got this, not creative, you've got this. But of course I had never associated any of that whatsoever to having a creative nature. And we all, and I suppose what I've come to see, myself and anyone included, have this innate creativity within ourselves. And we were born with it. It's always been there. But with the thinking that we give it and how we tell ourselves and how we have thoughts about what it is and what it's not, we believe that. We believe that for ourselves. And I suppose it's all made up. Just because we think it doesn't mean it's true. So that kind of is one example just about creativity. And I suppose when I look back, I've probably come across the understanding of the principles about 3 or 4 years now. And at the time that I came across it, my life was quite chaotic. As I say, I work, I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a member of a wider family. And at that time, things were pretty dark for me in life. And I ended up in London with Jamie Smart. And that's actually where we first met through Glasswing programme. And at that, this weekend, and Jamie was at the top of the room. And it was day 2 of the programme. And day 1, I'd come home to my husband had come over to London with me for the weekend. And day 2 of it, I was sitting in the room. And Jamie started to talk about La La Land. And he started to talk about anything in the future is La La Land. And I think if I recall, it wasn't a lot around that time that the La La movie that was in the cinema was kind of out and about. There was some La La film, La La Land film. So he started talking about La La Land. And when he started talking, I was thinking about an aspect in my work that I had a really, really challenging meeting that I used to go to on a weekly basis, or a fortnightly basis, or a monthly basis. And before I went into the room, for days beforehand, I was experiencing how difficult that meeting was going to be. And I was thinking about my experiences of before, which was filling me with being uncomfortable, anxiety, being really anxious about what was going to be said, replaying all that in my head about how it was going to be and how it had been before. And of course, it was going to be like that the next time. So I was having this experience for myself before the meeting ever started. And when Jamie was talking at the top of the room about this La La Land, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. So in a world they call, I had an insight. And it hit me like a ton of bricks in the fact that this is La La Land. I've been making this all up. It's all made up. That in that moment, in any present moment, I'm okay. But actually, when I go into my thinking about what has gone before or what's in the future, that it is La La Land and it's all made up. And there's just so much that it's just all made up. And I suppose that was one of my biggest insights. And I remember at the time when Jamie was talking about it, I erupted like a volcano. That's the only way I can describe it. I erupted like a volcano with emotion. And I started to cry. And I didn't know what was happening in the room because I just was crying. And I was just overcome with this kind of emotion. And after I came away down to the back of the room, I couldn't wait to get out of there quick enough because I was crying in a public place with all these people I didn't know. And what would they be all thinking about me? So down to the back of the room, and I remember talking to my husband that night about it. I remember my husband saying, if that's the only thing that you get out of coming to this weekend, well, everything has been worth it. And again, it was that it's all made up. That just because we think things in our head, it doesn't mean they're true. And then I suppose going from that, my second, biggest insight that I can recall, and I've had lots all the time, but probably these are 2 that kind of really stand out for me, is that thought-feeling connection. That actually where my thinking is in any moment is the same side of the coin as my feelings. That I can't think anything without having a feeling that goes with it. So again, when I go back to that meeting example, when I was thinking about it, I was having anxious thoughts, which was creating anxious feelings, or I was having peed off thoughts that was creating peed off feelings. Or I was thinking irritated thoughts, which was coming irritated. And I've worked in healthcare for 25 years probably now. That means I must be kind of more than 25. And in healthcare, we have to have a reason to everything. And there has to be proof, and there has to be research, and there has to be everything to go with it. So of course, when I heard that this thought feeling connection, I spent so long in my head trying to prove it wrong, trying to work out there'll be an exception. And at times I thought I was the exception. The truth be known, I was the exception to the whole of the world, that this thought feeling connection didn't exist. And the more and more that I saw this for myself, and the more and more I explored and examined and tested things, the more I saw that there's so much made up, so much. And I suppose then I can, a couple of years ago, I had a really fortunate opportunity to work in my local school. So we've got 4 children. So we've got grown-up children, we've got kid children, you know, kind of 10-year-olds, and we've got like 20 and 18-year-old. So I worked in the school where my younger children go, and I'd done a program as part of the WOW project. And I was in the classroom with the children, and we were talking about where our feelings and examples of that was a direct relationship with our thinking in any moment. And I remember with the children saying to them that if you think of yourselves on a beach, for example, and it's a really sunny day and you're with your parents, your family, your friends, and everybody's around. And I created this kind of example. And in the distance, you hear the ice cream van. And you ask your mum or dad or your parent or your aunt or whoever you're with, can I get an ice cream? And you have a kind of an expectation they're going to say no, but they say yes. How does that make you feel? You just had a classroom of faces, just really, really happy faces that were just all excited, but they could nearly taste the ice cream. They could feel, you know, the whole ambience that was on the beach. And we had that, and we kind of held that for a moment. A few minutes later, I said to them, now I'm going to give you another example. You're driving home from school, you're getting a lift home from, and unfortunately, one of the local dogs has been knocked over by a car and is lying on the road, and he looks injured. And just instantaneously, the whole classroom's faces all went glum. There was lots of you know, from the children about how that experience was for them, and how that made them feel. And then the beauty of that was talking back to the children, bringing them back to the beach situation just a few minutes later, and them seeing about how what they're thinking about in any present moment is giving rise to the feelings that's within them. And children, I suppose the younger children, unlike us adults, just kind of jump up from that quicker than ourselves. They just, oh yeah, we're sad. Oh yeah, we're happy. Oh yeah, we're sad. So yeah. So again, it's that all made up, that what's in our heads and what's in our minds, and that what we kind of bring, you know, kind of our consciousness does then give us the experiences that we have on a day-to-day basis. I'm pausing for a breath.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing for me is when we first met, which is right at the beginning, like you said, when you were at Glasswing and you really didn't know very much of it, and you hadn't had many insights yet, and you were still in that old, listening to that old thinking. And we did a session not long afterwards like this, and you are so different. You were like a different person now. You were still really anxious and starting to get the understanding, but like you said, still looking for, where doesn't this work for me? How is this not right? You know, and I'm really interested in, since that, because we were talking about, because I'm a doctor and interested in this understanding in medical students and in hospitals and general practice and so on, and you being in nursing and in management in the hospitals, we were looking at how would this help? How could this help in health service and so on? And even then, you were so anxious about your meetings, and I don't know if I can talk to them about it, and I don't know. So what's happened about that since? Because I know that's changed. I know that's changed in a big way.
Yeah, so I've had numerous conversations with people over the last couple of years, and been in a position to coach a number of people as well that work in health service, both in health service and outside of health service. And I suppose for me, this style of coaching, is it coaching or is it sharing the understanding? There's a little bit of kind of both in that, because in the coaching sort of conversation, it's pointing people back to where their experiences come from. And we have, like, all over the social, the media now is all about burnout and stress, etc., in healthcare services. And actually that's where I came to all of this, because it was from burnout and stress that brought me on this journey. And at the time, when I came on that journey, it was very, and I think maybe I was diagnosed with anxiety or depression. And very soon to come to this understanding, I had this, realization and insight of my own, which led me to come off medication within 5 or 6 weeks of coming across this understanding. So I've been able to, I suppose, have conversations with people, and people tend to come to me to talk to me about these things. I don't go looking for people and talk to me about maybe them feeling anxious and feeling fed up in work and wanting to leave quite often and not knowing about whether to leave healthcare. Some of them conversations I've been able to have with them about where their experiences come from. And a bit like myself, people have never really thought about the fact that where our thinking derives from, or just because we think these things that it is true or not true, just like I hadn't. And there's quite often that light bulb moment that, when I have a conversation with people, that then it's just creating that space for them to see that for themselves. And I recall a number of people. There's a girl that I was speaking with a couple of years ago, and just 2 conversations of about an hour long. I didn't see her then for a couple of months. And when I did, she had had a promotion 2 grades higher than her previous promotion, and she was off her medication that she had that was taken for depression. And life was just a whole lot clearer for her. And again, people carry things. I quite often liken it to in a rucksack. People carry things like my creativity story. They carry that as they go on in life, and they believe it, and they think that's how they are. They think that's kind of part of the package of who they are. And actually, when they start to see through that for themselves, they realize that actually maybe I don't need to carry that anymore. And they can test it for themselves and wonder, do they have to carry it anymore? So I've had multiple conversations with people. I've just recently been doing a program through Scotland, a Scottish fellowship around quality and safety in the NHS, and it's been an international program. So I've been having conversations with people right across in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Denmark, whatever. And I'm pointing to them. And one of the analogies I quite often talk to them about is around that snow globe analogy. That, that when we're under kind of pressure, etc., that our mind and our thoughts are circulating around like an absolute tornado in our head. And we can't see the wood for the trees. And quite often in health, when people are looking at frontline services, and they're presented with a patient that's maybe very sick, etc., and in a ward that's maybe got not enough resources as they would like, they're maybe later in their shift that they should be, and all of these thoughts are circulating in their head, and they're trying to maybe make sense of the patient's condition and a diagnosis, etc., and all of this is circulating. And while all of this is circulating like the snow globe, you can't see the picture in the snow globe while the snow globe is all shaken up. But when the snow globe settles down, which is a bit like, our mind, kind of the metaphor of our mind as well, when these thoughts in our mind settle down, then the picture becomes pretty clear and they can see exactly. And there is that of settling into that present moment to allow themselves that in that moment that they are okay. And the more present they are with that patient or that other staff member or etc., that actually they're okay. And everything within them is okay. And they've got this innate resilience within themselves to be okay. So that has been quite huge for a lot of people, to just see that for themselves and actually question it for themselves, because they've never really questioned, where thinking comes from. Because quite often in health, there's lots of understandings about, different theories, Freudian theory, etc., that has all that. And if they're a psychiatrist, they've studied all those, even as part of our nursing. Way back when I was doing my nurse training, there was all these psychology theorists that we would have studied, etc. So that would be the same in quite a lot of the disciplines across health. And because they've come like a scientific sort of background as well, this is a bit too simple to just be. So it's kind of a bit unbelievable first. It can't be this simple. It can't be just all made up, because we have to have fact and we have to have a reason. So there's a bit of that in a lot of the conversations, is the simplicity of it and pointing people back to the simplicity. And I suppose another, I'm very interested in quality improvement and have been involved in that a lot in the last couple of years. And as part of that, I had the opportunity to speak with a team of doctors, junior doctors. And junior doctors are really challenged at the moment. And there's all that theories around millennials, etc., and how people at this age are. And again, they're coming in and they're struggling. They're really struggling with developing in their medical careers as they come out of school and start to become, part of healthcare and start to be really active on the wards. So I had this opportunity to talk to them about resilience. And again, it's just pointing that back to that they are actually deeply okay, that behind it all, behind all of the thoughts that are floating in their head, when you strip that completely back, behind that, the purest of them is okay. And it's fine. And I'm pointing people back to things that they do in their work, in their week, that they enjoy. In them moments, they're okay. And in them moments, what's the difference in that moment against the moment that they're not feeling okay? And quite often the moments they're really okay might be driving home, it might be in the shower, it might be when they go for a walk, it might be the first day they go on their leave and they're getting on a plane, and they're elated and this and the other. So in that moment, they're okay. So, and I suppose the biggest part of the toolkit with this is that when people start seeing it for themselves, it doesn't matter what's going on around them, because that still is the same, but their perception of it becomes completely different because they see within themselves that they are okay.
Yeah. Yes, I'm just trying to think what difference it might have made for me when I was a medical student and junior doctor, because everyone was struggling, and everyone was, even then, we were all struggling, or most people seem to be struggling. And it's difficult to imagine now what it would have been like if I had known that. I know, like I said to you before we started, that yesterday I was starting to struggle because I was thinking, oh, I've got so much to do in the next 3 weeks with all these people coming and all this stuff to do. And but so quickly, and it just built up and built up and built up over a few hours. And then suddenly I noticed what I was doing, and I was listening, that I was taking those thoughts seriously. And it's like, what are you doing, Anne? It's life. It's just a big game. I'm okay. These things are going to happen. They might happen. They might not happen. Just, in myself and right now, I'm absolutely fine. Why am I, why batter myself with that, So yeah, it must make a big difference, I think. Yeah. Maybe. So can you say a little bit more? I know you've said a little bit, but just say a little bit more about how you get them to see that they are okay behind all of that. And you gave a couple of examples, but quite quickly, I think.
Okay, so how can I'm just thinking about my children, I suppose, in the home, and how we've had conversations. That I remember this one story. I remember my younger children, and this then has become kind of a talking point across the family, so to speak. But around that, I think it was around the time that I was maybe working in the school, I was having a conversation. I've been talking to it, and when I found out about it first, I actually absolutely wanted to force feed everybody with it. Especially in my family. You've got to see this. You've got to see this. You've got to see this. And it's not that, people have got to be open for it to see, to want to see, and inquisitive and curious. So it was one particular night, my youngest daughter, it was a summer's night, and she was going to bed, and she was having some sort of kind of nightmares or whatever. It was a windy night, even though it was the summer, and outside her bedroom there was a fluttering of trees, which was causing shadows on the curtains or whatever, and she was becoming quite scared. And my older daughter had asked me to go in and talk to her, so I had went in and I sat down and I talked to her about this, what you're experiencing. Remember, I says I was telling you about this, what you're experiencing, because you're thinking about that. You are really kind of thinking on it and thinking on it, and that's where your feelings are coming from, and that's what's making you anxious. And again, I used the same kind of principle as I had in the school and said to her, in a couple of weeks we're going on holidays. And do you remember last year we went on holidays and we went to the water park, and we started talking about that. And then all of a sudden she was kind of giggling at the fact, and maybe saying to her something like, do you remember Dad going down the slide and what it was like, or your brother going down, whatever. And she was giggling. And I said, see the way that you're just, but when you're given that loads of attention, them thoughts that are coming into your head, this is causing the feelings within you that's feeling scared or afraid of what's going on. So we had that, and she was really settled, and I came away and back into the sitting room, and she settled down. I said goodnight to her, and she's one of a twin, so her twin brother was in the bedroom opposite. And next of all, I wasn't 5 minutes sat down, and her twin brother called me, Mom, she's upset again. So off I trot. So when I went back into my daughter's room, there was a little bit of, have we not been through this? As I was going in. And I sat down on the bed and I talked to her about it. And again, reiterated what had gone on. And I found myself saying to her, Anya, it's like we have a button on our nose. And the button is just there to be pressed if we need to remind ourselves where our thinking is coming from in that moment. And at any point, you can press your nose and press that button to realize where your thinking is coming from. And that can flip a switch, and it can ignore them thoughts or maybe think about something else. So her brother was across the room, taking fits of laughing at his crazy mother, what she was saying. So we went with that, and that became quite a conversation in our home, and still has. That, if I'm cross with them and I'm saying to them, if the bedroom's not tidied, or, why is your shoes in the sitting room? Whatever, the usual sort of things that I do as a mother. They quite often will say to me, so Mum, where's your thinking coming from? Why don't you press your nose, Mum? And and that, when I talk to people about that story, I remember having a conversation with one of my consultant that works in a different part of the organization, different organization as well. And that consultant was having challenges with the people that she was working with, the team that she was working with. And she used to reflect back to me that sometimes when things were difficult, she would find herself in the lift thinking of this story, kind of pressing her nose. She was thinking, what you do, this crazy woman? I'm in this lift pressing my nose, pressing my nose. Don't react, don't react, don't react. Because she was very aware that she was giving this thinking a whole lot of attention, which was making her feel frustrated, making her feel agitated, angry, or whatever. And actually, the more attention she was giving to them thoughts was adding more and more layers to the experience that she was having. I saw it again over the weekend with the younger children and my older son. My husband had asked the younger children to do something in the garden, and they were playing with their gadgets. And at the weekend, they get to play with them and they have kind of limited time. So my husband had said, right, break from that. Need you to go into the garden and do X, and you do Y. And the girl twin was really caught up in her head about it. So she sat like with a little grumpy face on, doing the chore that she had to do. And my son, he just got on with the job in hand. And next of all, when he got his job and chore done, he was out kicking football. And a big happy face on him, and kicking football and doing uppies and downsies, or whatever they're called in football land. And my daughter then was sitting, kind of going over and over in her head about how life was so tough on her because she had to do this job. And my older son was there, and of course I called him over to the window and I says, look, that is the difference there about how thought works. I said, look at that, two complete different experiences of two different people that is doing this, to themselves, that one has absolutely ignored that he's really annoyed that he's had to come away from his game and do a chore. He's just got on with it, and he's now concentrating on his football, and he's got a big happy face and he's having fun. And the other person is just, kind of sitting there really annoyed and getting herself more and more annoyed and becoming nearly tearful of the fact. And my older son took a video of it, at one point, and he was sending it to his friends, of course, showing about the really interested worker. He was sending it on Snapchat or some of these things to his friends, and was getting quite a reaction from his friends about that. But the point that I was having the conversation with my older son was, well, isn't that funny how that if we add loads of thinking to it, and if we give it loads of attention, that how the experience for two different people that left here, both left the kitchen quite grumpy, were annoyed that they had to do something, and about within 5 minutes, we've got two completely separate realities going on about their experience, because one is really focusing on what's in their head at the moment, whereas the other has just let it go. So I suppose I would when I would talk to people about this understanding, I probably would use a lot of stories, which then allows people to see in their own lives of examples that this would show up for them. Because I can't tell anybody how this works. As far as I can see, I can only create an atmosphere, or kind of create a condition for them to see things for themselves. And I tend to do that through the use of stories and then just being curious and inquisitive. And my older two children are of an age that quite a number of their, kind of in their world, it's tough. It's tough for teenagers and early 20s these days, with all of social media, etc. And just having conversations with with them about kind of how life is for that age at the moment, with so much social media and so much, I suppose, expectations about how people should be, and then people believing about how they should be, and that could be to do with body image, and about we should be so thin, or we should be so a certain size, we should be so tall, we should be really friendly with everybody, all of this. And people believe these sorts of expectations for themselves, and these expectations for themselves again are all made up. because one of the things I saw for myself, if I don't have any expectations, I can't have any letdowns. So if I expect that I go to the supermarket and meet a really nice cashier and I get a space quite easily in the car park, if that's my expectation going to the supermarket, then if that doesn't happen, I leave myself in a position for a disappointment. Whereas if I don't have any expectations, well, you meet it at where it's at.
And I was just thinking back about creativity as well, and how, particularly in the health service, for example, since that's what I know, if there's so much, we have to do this and we have to do that and we have to do, as you said, there's so many thoughts going on about how things have to be done, and they have to be done the same way, and people don't realize, again, that they have this creativity. That was just an example I know that you used, but actually creativity is such a big thing for all of us, that we all do have it, because as little children, we're creative all the time. We're always creative. We're always thinking up something else to do and something else to do without thinking about it, just automatically doing it. So I can imagine that once people who are in authority in the health service, for example, see that we all have this innate creativity, and they don't, and that we have access to it, that must make a big difference too. Do you talk about that to them too?
Yeah, I suppose that's one of the reasons that I was so attracted to the whole quality improvement methodology. So most of my career, it's been about, we hear about audit and research. Whereas quality improvement for me is another dimension of that. So the difference for me in audit and research is that's a moment in time, and that's to prove a point. Whereas the quality improvement for me is around, most, if not all, healthcare professionals have come into their role of work because they want to do things better and make things better for patients or clients that they serve. That's kind of a fairly given sort of thing that they come in. And they get held back either within the systems they're working with or within themselves of actually pushing forward and for themselves. And one of the things that attracted me to the whole quality improvement with this understanding as well is that quality improvement is about testing small things, being creative, trying it, not being afraid to fail. How, if it doesn't work, rather than this big bang approach, we're going to by next week or next month, and we're going to bring in the form, and it's going to be a black across the department. The quality improvement very much is about bringing in something and testing. So it builds and allows people to let their creativity build with it, about testing things, trying it, and if it doesn't work, kind of making it, trying again. And then when people are in that space for creativity, then more creative juices flow, because then they think of other things that they could do that would make it. The health for years has been quite entrenched about this is the way to do it, this is the way, this is only the way. So now I see that, with this understanding as well, it really kind of supports that sort of approach. And again, touches people's soul of what they want to do and why they come in to do what they did from the outset. And it's peeling back those layers of, no, I'm not able to do that. So why? Why aren't you able to do that? And keeping asking that why, and getting that, well, start something small, and then people then build their confidence and start to break through that sort of barrier of, I can't, I'm not able to. And then start to see that they've got this complete creativity within themselves that's actually bursting quite often to get out, but they've convinced themselves through quite often the thinking about a situation or themselves that they can't.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that all those, I can't do that, and I shouldn't do that, and this can't happen, and that is all just thought that doesn't know what it's talking about. Once you realize that that's all just thought that doesn't that's just made up, and we don't have to listen to it, that can make a big difference too. So are you still working in your department in the hospital?
Yeah.
So
I'm still. I've kind of got my hand in a number of pies. So I still have my job in the hospital. As I say, I've just done this quality improvement journey for the last year, and now I've got involved with the first Northern Ireland Flow Coaching Academy. And it's again a very different sort of approach, which I'm delighted to see that it's the first cohort in Northern Ireland. And again, it's moving to that coaching people to get the best out of them, and very much about that flattening hierarchies, and the answer is in the room, and people are people, and just because you're of a certain level or grade doesn't mean to say you have all the answers, about generating the space for people to come up with ideas about making changes within service areas or departments, etc. So I, as well, kind of job, all as part of my job. So I'm doing that as part of a development.
Losing you again now.
Great opportunity. Sorry.
From I lost. You said that you were still there. The last couple of sentences we missed, I think.
Okay, so I was talking about the flow coaching in Northern Ireland. So I'm involved in that, and this is the first cohort for Northern Ireland. It's there's a number of places in the UK that has already started this journey, and again, it's a different approach. It's an approach about bringing quality improvement methodology, coaching, very much using psychology of people as well to bring people to a shared purpose about why they have come in to do the jobs they're doing. It's about flattening hierarchies, and the answer is in the room, and encouraging people to come and to contribute their information, their ideas, rather than the assumption that just because you're of a certain level, or you're the manager, or you're the consultant, or you're the whatever, or the ward sister, that you have the answers. And it's about nurturing that whole creativity within a group or a department of people, or outside of that department, because healthcare is so interlinked. There's no part of healthcare that can work independently on their own. Every part of healthcare is so complex. They're all relying on different departments and different people for patients' pathway of care. So that's quite exciting for Northern Ireland. So I'm involved in that as well. And again, it's it's quite a lot of, I suppose, psychology with all of that, for people to kind of again break through some of them barriers, because we talk about a thing and we talk about a concept, I suppose, around psychological safety in healthcare, and quite often people don't feel that they can speak up and give their ideas or examples because of maybe hierarchical structures, whereas this very much is about flattening that and building safe places for staff to be able to feel psychologically safe within themselves to bring forward their ideas. And again, no idea is too silly. It can be tested in a controlled way. If it doesn't work, back to the drawing board. And then it's about people empowering and owning that for themselves. So that's very much, and again, it goes back to that kind of experience of people in the past, of how they maybe have perceived themselves to not being able to contribute. But again, that quite often has been all made up, because they have created a story often for themselves that, oh, I couldn't suggest that, or I couldn't suggest that. Yeah. And
also I can imagine it also takes some of the pressure off the people who think they should know all the answers. The people who, so you're talking about people in the hierarchy, you're talking about people who would normally have been at the bottom, and then there's the people who would have thought of themselves at the top, who might feel under pressure to come up with these, they should know everything, which of course they don't. And I was just wondering if if maybe they felt threatened. Is there anybody who feels threatened by this leveling out of it? I would have thought that most of them would feel relieved that they didn't have to have all the answers, but at the same time, some people think they do have all the answers.
Yeah, and definitely people can feel threatened, because again, people will have come up with a whole story themselves about how they feel they should be and how they feel they should maybe have all the answers. And which again, they may have built that up and put that into their rucksack and built it over time. And I'm supposed to know, and I'm supposed to know. So egos can really be at play here, because actually, how am I going to let that go to allow people to come up with the ideas? Because that might take away from me actually being the all-knowing, the leader, the all. So people in the higher grades also have a journey to go with that as well, of letting go and allowing the people that are actually maybe at the front line and the coalface of services give their opinion, and trusting in that. And the trusting in that can be quite difficult for people, because if they've kind of shown up in their work life for a number of years, and quite often most of their career, in a kind of a control and command sort of environment, this is what we need to do, this is how you do it, start this next week, then that's quite a shift for people to let go of that sort of belief system within themselves and those rules that they've created for themselves of how they should be, to just overnight say, okay, yeah, you come up with the answers. So so it's a journey for everybody really within that, about kind of testing their beliefs and their stories that they've created for themselves, to come to, but quite often then is quite often a real leveler in that is that when you bring the patient's story into the middle of all of that, that can help focus the mind for people, about actually what is the purpose and passion for all of us that are here to do what we're doing. So that often can help. It is a challenge for a lot of people to shift this sort of dynamic.
Yes, but the great thing about this understanding is once they realize where their experience, where all those feelings about that are coming from, and where their experience of that is coming from, then it isn't actually threatening anymore. It just feels threatening to start with, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
because when they see that, when people see, so even there, week in work last week.
No, we've lost you again completely.
And Saturday,
lost
me again.
Yeah, I lost you right from the start of that part. I lost you again completely.
Oh gosh, do you know what point we were at?
Just when you said yes, they do. This understanding does make a difference to them. I didn't hear anything after that.
Okay, so I suppose what I was saying, that this understanding does make a difference when they see that they are creating the experiences for themselves. As I say, given where their thinking is, and I suppose I was reflecting on, at the end of last week, I had a particularly challenging time in work, and on Friday night when I come home from work, and on Saturday, oh my God, I was physically and mentally exhausted, and I could find myself really given a lot more attention than I usually would. And I just was cold, I was tired, I had no energy, I just really felt really zapped. And all I wanted to do was kind of snuggle up under a blanket and put a big fire up. We are in June, it's supposed to be the summer in Ireland, not that makes a difference. But so I could find, but within it, I knew that my own thinking about this situation was causing my experiences. And I think that's the beauty of it. I could reflect back to a number of years ago, and I would have made that story a lot bigger. It would have lasted a lot longer. I would have it a look. Whereas I kept calling myself out on it and going, there you go again, there you go again. And I was ignoring it. And at different times when I found myself getting sucked into the thoughts about different things that was going on and believing them as well. That then I would kind of think, all right, there I go again. And maybe I would go and read a chapter of a book just for half an hour, or go and put a wash on, but I kind of was a little bit kind of, and I could find myself on Saturday, I was kind of just a bit in my head for a lot of the day, and a bit up and down, and a bit grumpy, and a bit, all of that. But at the same time, I was to my husband at the time, this will pass. I'm giving too much attention to these thoughts in my head. It's not to say they're true. And then the funny thing was, yesterday I got up and the world was just completely in a different place. It's like, because then I was laughing at myself yesterday at the fact that I had given all this attention to these thoughts that had been going on. And the more I was
sorry, I was just thinking when you spoke about the weather, about global warming, and I know that's not what we're talking about, but it just occurred to me that even that, people are, there's this big thing and people are so worried about it, but it's no different, is it, from finding the solutions when you're in the health service and you're looking for solutions to however it's organized and what you're doing. This is on the next scale, what's going on in the world, or the big issues that are going on in the world. This might not seem to apply to that, but it's the same thing, basically.
Yeah. It's, as I say, the more attention we're giving these things, that we're creating, the experience. So, I don't have a huge interest in a lot of politics about, but look at the amount of people that are getting so in their head about what's Brexit. Like where I live, if Brexit comes in and there's a border 2 fields across from my kitchen, I'm not sure how I'm going to get across. But for me, spending now in my head worrying about what Brexit's going to be like for me and how it's going to be is kind of a bit of a waste of time, I find, because I think when the time comes, if that's the decision that there is going to be, well, Louise will deal with that when that happens. Or if it's going to be in 2 weeks' time, then my own wisdom within myself or my husband will point me to what I need to do if I need to get a green card, or if I need to, do this, that, and the other. But actually spending hours and hours thinking and overthinking that is just...
Wouldn't it be great, though, if the politicians actually had this understanding so that they could actually get together and come up with this creativity and be on the same level instead of just trying to argue with each other, which doesn't seem to make much sense to me, because they're just listening to all sorts of thinking about, I don't know what. I can't quite work it out, but
yeah, of how they believe it should be in their minds, or in the information that they have available to themselves. They've created a story for themselves how they believe it should be. But again, that's I know it sounds kind of very simplistic, but that's just made up. It's just made up if I have a day off during the week like today about how my day should be. And if I worked that expectation of it, I miss the experience, because I'm actually trying to get somewhere instead of actually just being with the day and experiencing it from moment to moment of how it is. And that another thing, I suppose, was quite a big thing for me with this understanding, is that I remember writing a bit of a post about a blog on it, about that if we are spending our life getting from A to C, so, and I can reflect back when I had a lot of stress and pressure in work, I was spending most of my week to try and get to Friday, till I got home, opened the fridge door, and got wine down my throat. Because the busyness, and I go back to the snow globe, the busyness in my head about all that was going on in work and all that was happening at that time was really filling my head so much that at that time, the only thing that I felt that was allowing it to stop was a good few glasses of wine to make it stop for me. And that's what, has, kind of, that settled it all down. And then after a really busy week and exhausting myself with all this kind of thinking that was going over in my head, and then on top of that, this numbers of glasses of wine on top, which made me even more tireder. And it was a vicious circle. And then by the time I go back into Monday, well, by the time I get to Sunday, I'm in my head again about all this thing that's going to happen next week. It hasn't even happened yet. And I've played in this vicious circle. And it's quite interesting because through no intent whatsoever, as I saw this for myself in time, my whole relationship with alcohol has completely changed, transformed. Because the alcohol is not a dependent for me to bring me from A to C. So we spend our week trying to get from, I spent my week trying to get from Monday to Friday, trying to get from A to C, as I talk about. But while trying to get from A to C, I missed B. I didn't experience B. I whizzed past B because I was always trying to get somewhere, into work in the morning, get through to the end of the day. So I missed lunchtime. I missed 10 o'clock. I drove to work and I didn't see what was outside of the car because I was in my head thinking about how I was, and actually how life has been so much more pleasurable, and actually brought me to a kind of a place of kind of contentment, which I never knew existed. Nobody had ever told me that this was there, was anyone could get there. That this is within ourselves, that we actually can access the time. We don't need to wait for a Friday night. We don't need to wait for Sunday lunchtime. That at any moment in our life that we're able to access this place of kind of complete serenity in ourselves.
Gone again after serenity. You ended on serenity and then it disappeared.
Okay, so the serenity, I suppose, is the place that is accessible to us all to get to. And we don't have to wait till a Friday. We don't have to wait till a Sunday. We don't have to wait till our holidays. It's accessible. And that's the beauty of all this innate health that we have within ourselves, behind all this thinking that we create and make up, that actually it's available to us all and accessible to us all at any point in the day, now, in this moment, in an hour, in the middle of a really crazy meeting, when I'm getting in my head, I can just access that place when I just don't give the thoughts in my head the attention and don't believe them.
Yeah, that's lovely. Well, I think that's a really good place to stop, because that's just summed it all up. That's lovely, lovely. So thank you very much for that. I think we've got clear now how it's all made up. So thanks very much. And I'll be speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much.
See you later. Bye then.
Bye.